Zach, who is back on with us. Zach, of course, is in our military, has extensive military experience, and we're very grateful for that. He's running for Congress as well, but really he's here today to talk about the military side of what is happening in Ukraine. So I just showed you a photograph of the airport west of Kiev, where they test and land and take off these huge Antonov aircraft. I should point out you are Air Force. The Russians took it this morning. The Ukrainians have now retaken it. That's a really huge story.
Simon, you're right. And this is a great showcase of Ukrainian resolve. You know, I was over there in 2019 when we were doing election monitoring.
Right.
And in that situation, Russian separatists had literally put landmines around the polling places. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, little grandmothers were walking through the landmines that were laid out to be able to go vote for their country. Mm. These are folks who have seen the worst of Russia Soviet style, and they do not want to go back to it. And so I'm proud not only to stand with Ukraine, but we have friends there. My friend Olga texted me at 5:30 this morning and said, you know, she woke up not to the sound of her grandfather's alarm clock, but to shelling that hit the apartment complex next door, leveled the apartment complex, and as opposed to running and fleeing the country, they ran out the doors and started taking pot shots at Russian fighters flying over.
You've shown me some video of that.
Yes,
if we can use it, you'll send it to me and I'll post it.
Yeah.
I'm not being rude to you right now. I'm looking for something very specific because I've got my head down, but I can talk and think and chew gum all at the same time.
That's
it's really
exactly
quite
right.
remarkable. So that airport retaking is a massive thing, but at the same time, our Iowa farmer, who is on the ground there, tells us they expect Russian troops to be in Kiev tomorrow.
They're roughly
trying
80 kilometers
trying
north.
to cut off the head of the snake? Is that what they're trying to do?
You know, I'm getting a lot of reports that the missile incursion into Ukraine has expanded greatly. It's nightfall there. They're having strikes throughout the entire country. There's a real attempt right now to cut the country in half and basically from Kiev to the east, bring it into the Russian sphere. You had Spetsnaz forces come ashore at Odessa this morning, our time. Russian forces come over the Belarus border. And you still got this bulk of Russian forces there facing down NATO along the Poland border. So they're keeping the West at bay, but moving a large force in of about 100,000 folks. The other aspect of this is, I think it's worth noting that you also got Russians who are reporting they don't even realize that they've invaded Ukraine. There's one platoon of Russian soldiers that came in, and one of the Russian soldiers recognized that this was his grandmother's village, and so he surrendered to the Ukrainians. I think that Putin has bit off far more than he even realizes. And just to put this into perspective, in the Czechoslovakian uprising, it took 600,000 Russian troops to suppress one city. He's trying to take over an entire country, roughly an area the size of Texas, with 41 million Ukrainians, with a force of 100,000 troops. We have the ability to push back. The Ukrainians have the ability to push back.
Now, the thing is, of course, that unlike here, Ukrainians are not armed.
Right.
Their civilian population's not armed. I am hearing that the Ukrainian government is giving firearms and ammunition to anyone willing to fight.
They are quickly rethinking that, aren't they?
Aren't they? So that is interesting in and of itself, that they're looking at it that way, and we should certainly be paying attention to that. The other thing we should be paying attention to is we are importing 595,000 barrels of oil from Russia every day. 595,000 barrels. I just want to remind people that day one of this administration, he cancelled the Keystone XL pipeline, which would have produced 830,000 barrels of oil per day.
Simon, you are 100% right. And so when we look at this, the cost of oil, just under the Biden administration alone, has gone up 140%. Mm-hmm. We're now talking about a barrel of oil that's over $100, and it's becoming close to 10% of all America's oil is coming from Russia. We are effectively, through taxpayer dollars and through us at the pump, funding a ruthless autocrat in Vladimir Putin that is invading a sovereign democracy. We have to stop that. Before we tell Germany or anyone in Europe, cut off another pipeline, we should be able to be helping these folks by strangling Russia's money source and still being able to protect one of the commodities that can be produced right here in the United States.
I mean, we really should have a president right now. If he wants to affect the price of gas at the pump, he should be saying, drill, baby, drill. Right now.
We have a strategic reserve for a reason, and it wasn't 3 months ago when he wanted a lower gas price to improve his poll ratings. This is what a strategic reserve is for, to cut off your enemies from their only source of revenue and to be able to make sure the American people don't have supply chain costs, don't have increased inflation across the board, because we just had one of our key sources cut off and are funding a Russian war machine.
They should be cut off. We should do
agree.
it right now.
Right.
Whatever effect that has on the price of gas at the pump for us, we absolutely should stop importing a single drop of Russian oil.
Totally agree. And Simon, here's my point. It shouldn't cost the American driver a cent. It shouldn't cost our supply chain a cent. We have that money right now. Turn that spigot on. I asked the Biden administration and those folks out in Washington, you could do that tomorrow.
Does this happen if there is a different president?
You know, it's difficult with a hypothetical, but I think we can see pretty clearly here that the last time Ukraine was invaded, we had a president who was not willing to stand up to Russia. Russia in Syria, Russia on the border with Ukraine, Russia in Crimea. But we did have a most recent president who made it very clear that he was a strong man and he would take strong action. And whether you like that or not, it kept not just Putin at bay, but it kept China at bay, and it kept North Korea at bay. Right. And here's my concern. When you show weakness to an autocrat like this, it breeds further strength in other autocrats. And so when I look at Ukraine, I'm also worried about countries like Taiwan and what China might do. I'm worried about what could happen to, you know, the fishing areas around North Korea and what North Korea might do. And I'm certainly worried about countries like Israel, our only friend in the Middle East that's a democracy, and what Iran might do, because they see this weakness repeatedly on the American front.
And I want to point something out here, which I said to you literally in the elevator. Right?
Yeah.
These conversations get repeated, ladies and gentlemen. To me, this isn't a conservative liberal thing. It isn't a left-right thing. It's not a Republican-Democrat thing. It's a leadership thing. And I don't think this happens if Bill Clinton is president of the United States.
You know, I would agree with that. Or Reagan, or, I mean, you go back. Harry Truman would never have allowed this to happen.
JFK.
Right. JFK stood down the Russians when they came to the brink. And here, I was with Secretary Pompeo this week and Senator Ernst, and they highlighted the fact that, you know what, we still have an America First policy, but we should never be an America alone situation. And we have now effectively put ourselves in a box where Western Europe can't look to us, where the rest of the world sees us as trepid, and most importantly, where Russia sees us as a cash cow of money, but someone who's not willing to stand up for a free democracy.
So the policy of this administration, we're gonna pause in a minute and continue this. So maybe I'm going to ask you this question and then we'll pause and come back. The policy of this administration is sanctions. We are going to punish Russia, us and the rest of the world. Now, Putin, whatever you think of him, he's no idiot, right? So he's looked at it, he's done the calculation, he stopped laughing, and he rolled the tanks. So how do we get out of it? That's the question I'm going to ask Zach Nunn any minute now. All right, we're in the studio with Zach Nunn.
Much better than snow in Iowa right now.
Right now, yeah. And I asked him a question before we went to the break. Putin, no idiot. Whatever you think of him, he's not an idiot. He was told about the sanctions before they happened. He waited up, and then he rolled the tanks. How do we get out of this?
You know, I've never seen a situation where a president calls out a day for invasion. Repeatedly gets it wrong, and then the invasion happens, and we roll out some of the most moderate or at least mid-level sanctions across the board and think that that will have an impact. And the only, you know, checkpoint for this is let's wait a month and see how Putin feels. At that point, a third of the country is already gone.
Right.
So
there's a lot of dead people as well.
Untold and unnecessary.
The Ukrainian health ministry is already reporting 50 dead and 160 wounded today.
And that's just what's been reported.
Oh, yeah. There's bound to be more.
So, you know, Simon, I think there's a couple of things we need to look at very effectively through history. You know, when we protected Kosovo, we provided a canopy of freedom to avoid the Serbians just destroying that country.
Right.
And it afforded the Kosovars the ability to get their breath and fight back and save their country. The same is true for Ukraine. I think we talked at the top of the show here. The Ukrainian people have the steel and resolve to defend themselves. We do not need boots on the ground. But we have the ability to destroy that first tank column they came across with a cruise missile. We should be lobbing tomahawks at individuals when they take off. We should be destroying the ability for the Russians to operate out of this area. Beyond just sanctions, we need to have a real kinetic response to what Russia is doing at this point, because now it's no longer diplomacy. We've tried the Neville Chamberlain approach, and he crossed that threshold. Now there needs to be a consequence for taking lives of others.
Because if there isn't, and I agree with you, we do not need boots on the ground there. If there isn't a consequence, then he's like, I think he's already laughing. I think China is laughing.
Right.
I do think there's a real prospect that China could take Taiwan. And obviously they would take Taiwan. There's nothing the Taiwanese can do to stop it if that's what they wanted. So we have this weak leader. And that's not healthy. It's not healthy for the country. It's not healthy for the world.
It sets a bad and dangerous precedence, not just for you and me, but I think for every kid that decides they're going to serve overseas. And whether that's with the military or U.S. aid or just have an experience overseas, that America is somebody who backs down. And worst of all, it's going to destroy the economy that we are still trying to rebound from, because around the world, people are going to clam up. And they're not going to have the type of resolve that our Ukrainian friends did, where they won't rush the grocery store. Other markets are immediately going to start locking down. And that's going to put us right here in Iowa in an economic world of hurt.
And you're still active duty.
Yeah, so
are you expecting to be deployed?
No, we should. I hope very strongly that we're not going to have anyone in Ukraine. Now, we are going to. We've already called up. The Department of Defense has called up individuals to serve in Europe. I think we're going to plus that up and back up our NATO allies, particularly Poland, which is on the front line here. And at any point, I'm very worried that this, what Putin calls a regional war, spills over into a larger conflict through a cyber attack or through misinterpretation. Let's not forget the Russians in 2014 and thereafter shot down a civilian airliner mistakenly, and have a huge impact. So I've flown reconnaissance missions off the coast of Russia before, and the Russians are no joke. They come out with MiG-29s. They force you off course.
I've seen that picture.
But you know what? We have to have the same steely resolve that the Ukrainian people do to say, Russia, you do not get to push around the rest of the world. You have an economy smaller than Canada. This should hurt and will hurt you much longer. But unfortunately, we've got a Putin who will just as soon shoot a Ukrainian as send a Russian conscript to his death as execute people protesting in Moscow. This is not a man who is rational.
Is it a man who stops if he takes full control of Ukraine? Let's give him the total victory. Does he stop?
Simon, this is a man who, if he takes all of Ukraine, he's emboldened to keep on going. And next you lose the Latvian, Lithuanian, Estonian allies.
Well, that's a completely different ballgame. Those are NATO countries.
Absolutely.
We have to get involved. It's what I've been warning for literally months on this show. I have said this is not about Ukraine.
Right.
This is about what happens next.
Right.
I understand nobody cares about Ukraine. It's sad, but they don't. The vast majority of people listening to us right now don't care about Ukraine. When it's a NATO country, we are treaty bound to get involved.
Most importantly,
people need to understand that.
You empower an autocrat, it empowers all of them.
Yep.
And let's not forget, Iran, China, North Korea, they are all watching this.
Oh, very much
U.S.
so.
does nothing, they act.
Zach Nunn, thank you very much for coming on, and sharing your expertise. Give out your website. We like
prayers are with the Ukrainian people. Thank you, Simon.
Absolutely.
Check us out, ZachNunn.com. We are running for Congress. We're out in the district all over the place. This is our third tour of all 21 counties. Honored to serve and look forward to meeting and hearing from Iowans.